Hi and welcome to another video by Landcycle. So my last video was showing you the constraint layers available on Landcycle and how powerful the picture that you can build up when you're looking at identifying land or single properties for development. And I spoke in that briefly about greenbelt. Should we develop in the greenbelt? Is it appropriate to develop in the greenbelt? And my point was that in some circumstances it is appropriate to develop in the greenbelt because land that's been designated as greenbelt by local authorities or by central government is sometimes not really performing as it should as a greenbelt location. What I mean by that is the greenbelt is not performing in its open status. It's not performing well in terms of its function as open visual green space. We talk about greenbelt when we think about greenbelt, we talk about sort of open farmland, open countryside. But because greenbelt does extend into some of the London boroughs and London itself, it is surrounded by development, and it's surrounded sometimes by roads and development. So I've come across this parcel here that I wanted to show you. So if I put on the greenbelt layer, you can see that all of this is greenbelt. Now, in my opinion, this particular property here and this bit here is not what I would consider standard classification greenbelt land, because it is very heavily surrounded by built form. And also it's got, so if we look at this parcel here, it has got a very significant defensible boundary. It's got the A3, which is a 3-lane road. So there's nothing stopping, in my opinion, development taking place in this area here, which would then be naturally stopped by the road to stop it from sprawling further south into these other areas below the road here. Now, this is where Land Registry can help you identify strategic land and how to quantify and value strategic land. Now, this is not only important from a developer's point of view, but this is also actually important from a local authority's point of view, because when local authorities are forced to consider housing allocations and housing sites where land could be released for housing allocations, then they often don't consider value as part of that allocation process. What I mean by that is that they look at a local map and a local plan, and they decide that they're going to release land from the greenbelt. Let's say they decide to release this land from the greenbelt, but they don't give any consideration to how that land will be delivered and the future contractual arrangements that the landowner may enter into with a house builder, and the price and values that are fundamental to that contract, and then whether or not that land will come forward based on its future contractual arrangement. So I know that sounds a bit complicated, but what often happens is you get a lot of developers competing for the same piece of land. They promise higher prices because they're in a competitive market. They sign at very high prices, but ultimately they can't deliver that land because they've committed too much of a high price on a conditional basis, on a subject to planning basis. So they find themselves having to walk away from land that they've actually signed, and they may well have spent a lot of money in trying to promote that land for housing to the local authority. So I think what I'm trying to say is I think it's very important that local authorities consider valuations when they're making their site allocations decision-making process. So let's have a quick look at how Land Registry can help. So what we do is we put on the Land Registry layer. Now, this is something that's worth saying. So if you put Land Registry layer on and you've got the greenbelt layer on, then Land Registry will go on top of that layer. If I leave Land Registry layer on and I turn greenbelt off and then I put greenbelt back on again, greenbelt will go on top of Land Registry. So you can play between the layers to sort of give yourself a picture of what you're actually looking at, if you're looking at Land Registry or if you're trying to see greenbelt. Now, we know, having flicked that layer on and off, that is a greenbelt site. We don't know who owns it, we don't know what it's worth, we don't know if it's one owner or two owners or what have you. So with the Land Registry layer on, I click on it, and it then gives me the information that I'm after, which is here in the right hand panel. So you click on it, pops up here in the right hand panel. Now, because this property is over 10 acres, in fact we can see if we now look over at this right hand panel here, it's actually 29.82 acres, let's call it 30 acres roughly. then it will automatically trigger a window here which says approximate valuation with planning consent. So this is what this land could be worth. It's an approximate valuation based on these metrics, based on algorithms that we've created in the background, which tell you some very important key information. So the residual land value here, if we've got a planning consent on this land for 223 houses, would be £21.9 million. Every acre would be worth £736,000 or £736,523,000. So the total land value is this £21.9 million. We've allowed for open space being 40%, and we've allowed for an average house size of just over 1,000 square feet, and we've allowed for a development density of 30 dwellings per hectare. Now, when strategic house buyers or strategic land buyers look at strategic land, this information is very important to them. So we provide that instantly, click of a button, any site over 10 acres, and it gives you this information. So let's think back now about the viability of this site. So is this appropriate to be released from the Greenbelt because it's not functioning as a Greenbelt site in planning terms? My view is yes, let's argue it's yes. The next question then a local authority should be asking is if it's signed by a national developer like a Taylor Wimpey or a Persimmon or whoever, what price have they signed that land? What price have they contracted to promise the landowner? Now, if they've contracted at a price that's higher than £736,000 an acre, then it's questionable whether or not that land will ever be delivered for housing. And this is one of the fundamental problems of housing delivery in this country. It's not that local authorities are not willing to release land for housing. In a lot of cases they are, and it's not the case that house builders necessarily land bank land that they've already achieved planning permissions on. That very rarely happens, because housing contractors and developers will spend a lot of money on promoting land for housing, and what they want to do is, as soon as possible, get onto that site, start building houses, start selling houses, and start getting a return on that investment. So there's a lot of talk in government about land banking and the major house builders land banking. That is very, very, very rarely the case. The reason that land doesn't come forward is because it's a competitive market, and house builders have overpromised value to landowners and they then can't perform. And that is ultimately where we see some of the sticking points in housing delivery in this country at the moment. So I just thought I'd share that with you. It's showing you how to identify a Greenbelt site, how to identify a strategic site, and then what information you can glean from the strategic valuation process. Hope you found that useful. Look out for the next video. Thanks for watching.